Okay, great. Thank you for coming. Okay, good evening. Since I can see Paul on the screen, Paul, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Debbie.
Okay,
Thanks.
perfect, great. Thank you. Okay, and did we hit the record button, Michelle? We are good. Okay, we are almost together. All right, welcome. I am Debbie Gross, the CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. Thank you for joining us at our Spring into Action benefit in Pittsburgh, and thank you for the good weather. Please welcome PMC staff, Michelle Jordan in the back, Nina Shabak, where's Nina? There. Violet Flynn, Violet, outside with Anna Wabuzi. So we have a new Pittsburgh program coordinator. Nina, can you just pop your head in? There you are. Nina, you're there. Nina's there. Sorry. Okay, I'm getting all confused. So I want to welcome Nina. Okay, so we are grateful that so many of you have joined us today in person and by Zoom. We especially thank our champion sponsors, Dickie, McCamey, and Chilcote, and UPMC. Your generosity and support are extremely appreciated. As I speak and continuing throughout tonight's events, you will see scrolling a list of our many supporters. PMC is dependent on two fundraisers, one in Pittsburgh and one in Philadelphia for the majority of our funding. We have no endowment. Whether you donated, volunteered, helped spread the word, or simply showed up tonight, please know that your contribution has made a real difference. 2025 has been and will continue to be a very active year for PMC. It is a judicial election and retention year. We have held a number of programs on court basics, what each court does, its makeup, and the impact on individuals' lives. We have held programs on how to evaluate the judicial candidates, explaining the qualities and values critical to judicial excellence, including the processes undertaken by bar associations in their judicial evaluation committees. We have had the wonderful assistance of Brian, who heads the Allegheny County Judicial Election Commission, participate on Zoom with our programs. We'll be having an appellate court candidate forum in the fall and a fireside chat with the appellate court candidates for the retention election. It's a lot of words, sorry. PMC has also focused this year on jury service with our Modern Courts, Modern Juries speaker series. Our first presenter was Nancy Martyr, who spoke on the power of the jury, discussing what makes juries work and the process of transforming citizens into jurors. Our second speaker will be Emily Coward on June 10th, who has studied factors promoting and undermining the impartiality of our jury. Our third speaker is James Binnell, who will discuss felon disenfranchisement and challenges this form of civic marginalization. Mr. Binnell was is an attorney in California now, but he was a resident in Camp Hill due to an unfortunate accident of being drunk while driving, let's put it that way. And his talent was recognized by somebody in the prison and suggested that he take the LSATs. He took the LSATs, got into law school, and then the hardest part was getting admitted to the California bar. But once he got admitted to the California bar and became a litigator, he realized that he could not sit as a juror. So he now has studied, the juror disenfranchisement. Our final speaker will be Honorable Catherine Forrest. She's the retired federal United States Southern District of New York District Court judge to discuss artificial intelligence and juries, similar to the topic that was addressed by our writing competition. We hope you will join us and spread the word. Jury service is not only crucial to our democratic society, but also reinforces public trust in the legal system and fosters civic engagement, strengthening the connection between citizens and their government. We have increased our community educational programming about the judiciary, courts, and law. Landlord-tenant programs continue to be in high demand in Pittsburgh. While virtual programming has been a benefit for PMC, we have also returned to in-person and hybrid programs. We work with our community partners on what they feel is the best way to reach their audience. We have had the great fortune to have a number of MDJs in Allegheny County reach out to PMC with ideas for programs, as well as willingly participate in our workshops. Information on our upcoming programs as well as recordings of our programs are available on our website. We have an unbelievable resource of recordings of our programs, which we have uploaded to our YouTube channel. We have had people call us and say, I've listened to this program and this has really made a difference in how in my rights in court, how I can protect my rights in court. So I want to thank all the presenters who are in the room because you have made a difference. Our Court Watch program has also grown and initially began in Philadelphia to observe preliminary arraignments. In the fall, we issued a report on the observation of court watchers. With development and oversight by our Pittsburgh program coordinator, Nina, we will be issuing our first report on observations of preliminary arraignments in Pittsburgh Municipal Court. We continue to partner with Carlow University, Chatham University, University of Pittsburgh, and Duquesne to oversee students. I am a strong believer of providing opportunities for and mentoring to students. Many of the students who have come to work for us, either through an AmeriCorps program, through an internship, through some kind of summer program, have gone on to law school. So it's really, it's our honor to work with these students and mentor them along. We hope to expand our middle and high school civics program to Pittsburgh in the coming year. We created this program in Philadelphia and now are in 15 different inner city schools with over 80 volunteers. Each month in a school, a judge and a lawyer go into a classroom with a prepared lesson plan to engage with the students. Our core curriculum consists of 4 lessons: the 3 branches of government, the judicial system, judicial selection, and jury service. The next 4 lessons can vary and range from environmental justice in collaboration, for example, with Teen Screens in Pittsburgh, which talks about the Youth v. Gov case in Montana, which is a case where youth brought against the government when Obama was president, asking for declaratory judgment or declaratory action by the government to protect their rights. It has gone up and down to the Supreme Court. There's been a trial. They also had a similar case in the state of Montana. There was a trial. So it's been an amazing process to teach the students to learn about the differences in rights and constitutions and laws between state and federal government, between the various levels of the court system. And the kids realize that they can actually make a difference. That this program, the students actually filmed themselves throughout the history of this case. So it's really an unbelievable movie because it's from the youth's perspective on the justice system. Our last class brings students into the courthouse. Many students have had some kind of negative experience with the judicial system, and this program provides them with the opportunity, I'm going to say, to change their perspective and experience. We have a judge who has, I'll say, an absolute passion for making sure that he attends all 8 classes. And so when he was out on a vacation, he asked the school to reschedule the class. But what happened was that he was in the supermarket and one of the students dragged his mother up to this judge to meet him and say, this is the judge that I've been talking about. So it really has a lasting impact on the students, this program, and I hope to bring it to Pittsburgh in the fall. Okay, so I'm trying to catch up and talk quickly, but I'm now going to welcome Paul St. Antoine, who is on our screen. He is a Fagery Drinker, Biddle, and Wreath. He is our chair of PMC's advisory board, and they are the sponsor of our writing competition. He is here to present and discuss our writing competition winner. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Debbie, and good evening, everyone. A highlight of the work of the advisory board each year is the student writing competition. We strive to pick a topic that reflects a fundamental issue in our judicial system, but also a topic that's going to be of interest to current law students. And this year, not to pat ourselves on the collective back, but we really think we hit the mark. This year's topic was the use of artificial intelligence in jury selection. And with a topic like that, we were not surprised that we received a number of excellent essays throughout the Commonwealth and also from Delaware. We do have a winner. The winner wrote an essay that acknowledged the longstanding problem of bias in jury selection and jury composition, and also discussed in a very thoughtful way how artificial intelligence could have both a positive and a negative impact on this problem of jury bias. The winning essay was both well written, it was thoughtful, and importantly, it really stood out because one of the points it made was we have to be very careful if you're going to use artificial intelligence to recognize the impact it might have on the public's perception of the fairness of the judicial system and the use of juries. So with that introduction, I am very pleased on behalf of PMC and my firm, Favorite Drinker, to announce that this year's winner of the student writing competition is Miss Sarah Ferguson from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Congratulations, Sarah.
Feel free to ask.
Hello, I would just like to say thank you so much to Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts for hosting this competition, and to the selection committee for reading all of our essays and selecting mine. I am a student at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a 3L and I'm graduating next week. So thank you. So this award will go a long way for me in terms of bar prep and supporting myself this summer. As was mentioned, I wrote my paper on the possibility of bias that AI poses in jury selection. As someone who's primarily interested in family law, I've seen a lot of bias in the court and how that can really play a role in the outcome. So in something like jury selection, I thought that it was very, very important to address how AI might contribute to that bias. So again, thank you so much to Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. It was a very honor to win this award. Thank you.
And Sarah's essay will be up on our website. And thank you, Sarah. And it was not, we've had winners that are not from University of Pittsburgh, so I don't want anybody to think it was fixed, even though we've asked the dean to speak and we have the legal counsel on our board, but there was no connection. Promise. Okay, so next we have the Honorable Tim Lewis to introduce our keynote speaker. I know you're here, Judge Lewis. Judge Lewis has been a huge supporter of PMC's, helping us out with programs, I think almost at least once or twice a year. He just helped us out with a program on judicial conduct. It was quite a challenge. We had a disruptor, I'm going to say, during our program. It was a virtual program. We've always done it by Zoom. We like to do it that way, not as a webinar, but as an opportunity for people in the audience to ask questions, for them to have a conversation and chat. We've been doing it this way for 5 years, have never had a problem, and we had a disruptor, is the kind way of saying it. And so, but Judge Lewis was very patient and even addressed the disruptor some of the questions. So I want to thank you so much in person for your patience and your help with PMC. So thank you.
Well, the disruptors are everywhere, aren't they? I mean, you just can't get away from them. That was actually a lot of fun. So first of all, congratulations, Sarah. There you are, Sarah. Congratulations on your award, and especially on your graduation. This is a wonderful way for you to get started. No question about it. And thank you for your contribution. Today, I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, my good friend, dear friend to many of us, Jerry Dickinson. As I thought about my introduction of Jerry, I realized that I could not help but reflect upon the legacy of one of my own mentors and one of the founders of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, Paul Titus, whose grandson is sitting right there in the last row to my left. Paul, whom we lost 3 years ago, was a man of such immense gentility and profound character that to be in his presence left one with a dichotomous sense of gratitude and humility. Gratitude for the opportunity to know a person of such virtue. Humility in the recognition that no matter how hard one might try, one could never quite achieve the level of sustained equanimity that he wore so effortlessly, so gracefully. And yet, that is precisely what our task is today, as we toil to preserve the pillars of our constitutional democracy, judicial independence, and the rule of law in the face of a daily onslaught upon both. Jerry Dickinson is a part of Paul Titus's legacy. And so is our friendship, because Paul introduced me to Jerry over a decade ago. And despite Jerry's important achievements and accomplishments over these past years, the person I met back then is the person I know today. Down to earth, transparent, focused on fairness and equality of opportunity. A Pittsburgh guy, I think you know what that is, who can relate to anyone in any situation. A loving father, a devoted husband, a brilliant constitutional scholar, and now the youngest dean of any law school in the United States. He brings to that position a life experience that forms what I think is the single most important aspect of any leadership position: one's values. Jerry's were developed through his upbringing in a family comprised of siblings from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. His were developed on the athletic field at Holy Cross and in the classroom at Holy Cross. They were developed through his superb performance at Fordham Law School. They were developed through his clerkship with Judge Ted McKee on the Third Circuit and his work at Reed Smith, where he also founded the Human Rights, Project. They were developed through his work as a law professor and as a candidate for office, and through his pro bono advocacy on behalf of the poor, the powerless, and the penniless. And all of this will enable Jerry to teach the next course, not just in constitutional law, but in excellence at an esteemed school of law at a time when a clear sense of our values, and an appreciation for how they affect our collective humanity matter perhaps more than at any time in our nation's history. There are times when right and wrong and the platforms that we have been afforded within our profession define our responsibilities with pristine clarity. This is such a moment. Our constitutional democracy faces unprecedented challenges. We need law school deans and professors who are not only well-respected for their scholarly achievements and fundraising capabilities, which are important, but who might also serve as role models for higher, more compelling principles. In this vein, Jerry Dickinson embodies what James Weldon Johnson described as the hope that the present has brought us. And so on behalf of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, would you please give my friend Jerry Dickinson a warm welcome as our keynote speaker this evening. Jerry.
Great. Thank you, Judge. What a surprise, pleasant surprise. I walked in and Debbie mentioned that the person who would be introducing me was Judge Tim Lewis, and that was wonderful. So thank you, Judge, so much for those kind words. I think back to those days when we first met, and Paul was the introducer, and it was great. Since then, of course, you know, I like to think that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and you and Paul are two of those giants whose shoulders that I am standing on. But as you mentioned as well, it's an obligation for me and many others to also serve as giants who's the next generation of lawyers. They can stand on our shoulders as well. Congratulations to Sarah for your award, well deserved. And of course, there was no Pitt law intervention, intermeddling whatsoever. But we are very proud to have a Pitt Law alum, or soon to be Pitt Law alum, win that amazing award. And I also want to thank, of course, Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts for inviting me and for hosting this event here at the University of Pittsburgh, especially to Debbie Gross for the invitation. Thank you so much when you reached out. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thanks to the board of directors, including the co-chairs, Sarah Gitchell and Joshua Richards, and for their continued efforts to strengthen civic trust in our courts. And I also want to acknowledge my dear friend, Javette Washington. Thank you. She reached out to me and helped support my efforts and participation here tonight as well. Javette's commitment to justice and public service continues to inspire me and many of us here in this room. So thank you, Javette, for all that you do. Your collective work in civic and education, judicial reform, public engagement for PMC is incredible. And I think in many ways, it's events like this that remind us that democracy is built not just in the courtrooms, but in communities, which is in large part much of the work that PMC is doing in the communities to educate the general population about juries, jury duty, and a number of other legal matters that are of great importance to all of us. And so thank you, PMC, for all that you continue to do for the state of Pennsylvania. So I want to start with my remarks, and I had a conversation with Debbie about you know, themes and topics that we may want to touch on, and I may want to touch on during this talk. You know, it became apparent that there are some clear overlapping interests in my scholarship that I'm doing now and the work that PMC is doing, in particular with regards to jury trials, jury duty. And so I want to start with a story, taking a step back to 1980. And Jefferson County, Kentucky. And a woman, her name was Henrietta Spencer. And on this day, this evening in 1981, she heard a noise outside of her door. Rustling, some noise, and she looked out, opened up the door, and there was a young black man. And at that point, that young black man was reaching for her purse. And in doing so, couple pieces of jewelry fell out, 3 in particular, and this gentleman had grabbed the pieces of jewelry and ran off. Now, she later identified the suspect as James Kirkland Batson. Batson was later arrested. He was charged with burglary and receiving stolen property. But something happened before that now historic, memorable trial. The prosecutor in Kentucky, in Jefferson County, used his peremptory strikes. He used his peremptory strikes to do what? To remove every black juror from the jury pool. Batson's lawyer, of course, objected, arguing that this was clearly racial discrimination. The judge at that time, at the local level, state level, rejected that claim outright. Nonsense. Batson, as a result of that, was convicted by an all-white jury and sentenced to 20 years. 20 years in prison. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in. Many of you will know this. This is Batson versus Kentucky, landmark decision, 1986. And the court there held, of course, that racially discriminatory jury strikes violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. It was a landmark moment for racial justice, undoubtedly. Now, let's take a step back 20 years from there, from 1981. Now, we're in Louisiana. Gary Duncan, a 19-year-old black student, saw his younger cousin surrounded by white students after school. Concerned for their safety, of course, Gary intervened. He touched one of the white boys on the elbow and told his cousins to leave. The white boys then claimed that he had slapped them. Duncan was arrested for simple battery, a misdemeanor punishable by up to 2 years. Duncan asked for a jury trial. This is the 1960s in Louisiana. Louisiana said, no jury trial for you. Jury trials were only for cases punishable by hard labor or death. So he was tried by a judge, not a jury, convicted and sentenced to 60 days in jail and a fine of $150, which, as you can imagine, in 1960, is quite a bit of money. That case is Duncan versus Louisiana, Supreme Court decision in 1968, yet another landmark decision related to jury trials and jury selection. Supreme Court reversed that lower court decision and said that the right to a jury trial is absolutely fundamental and states must honor it under the 14th Amendment. Now, what is oftentimes missed from Duncan versus Louisiana and Batson versus Kentucky is the following. And this gets into some of the ongoing legal scholarship that I'm doing at this very moment. How I have time for this, I don't know as dean. My wife thinks I'm nuts. The kids think I'm nuts. Javette thinks I'm nuts. But what's really fascinating about those two landmark decisions is this. Those legal breakthroughs in Batson and Duncan did not originate in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not, out of whole cloth, create this doctrine of peremptory strikes out of thin air. Nor did the Supreme Court in Duncan, out of whole cloth, out of thin air, create a doctrine which required that serious crimes would be and would go to a jury trial. In fact, before Batson ever made it to the Supreme Court, it was the state courts. And this is why this is so important for the work that PMC is doing. It was the state courts, in particular, one state court, California. California State Supreme Court had already banned race-based jury strikes long before the United States Supreme Court decided to do so. And California did it under the state constitution. They said, under our state constitution, there is a prohibition on racially peremptory strikes. Massachusetts followed the same path as California. The federal court, in other words, the U.S. Supreme Court, didn't create the doctrine. It adopted what the states had already pioneered. Likewise, in Duncan, 49 out of the 50 states had already guaranteed jury trials for offenses like Duncan's. Louisiana was the outlier. There, the Supreme Court effectively used the overwhelming evidence of state law for jury trials to shape and inform its decision to create a federal constitutional protection under the Sixth Amendment. In other words, these were not top-down rulings from the Supreme Court to the lower courts. In fact, it was bottom-up from the state courts up to the Supreme Court. This is a very, very different mode of constitutional interpretation, and one that is not engaged in very often by the Supreme Court, but it's really important. Let's take a step back. The federal shadow and lockstepping. For decades, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, has cast a long, long shadow over state courts. You're all familiar with this, from the New Deal court, from the Warren court, even onwards. When the court announces a constitutional decision, many state courts follow lockstep. They adopt what the Supreme Court has said. They interpret their own state constitutions to be the same as the federal Constitution. But here's the thing. State constitutions and state laws are not copies of the federal Constitution. They are living, breathing documents. They are distinct in language. They have deeper protections than the federal Constitution. When state courts take their own constitution seriously, when they stop copying what the Supreme Court has said, they often lead to ways in expanding rights and strengthening democracy. And that is what we saw and see in Batson and Duncan. That's the heart of what I call bottom-up constitutionalism. This is the focus of my forthcoming book entitled The Bottom-Up Constitution, States and the Evolution of American Constitutional Law. This approach flips the usual script that somehow the Supreme Court hands down a decision and everyone else follows suit as a result of that. But that is simply not always the case. It is the reverse that we see. That is, from the rulings of state courts, from state legislation, there are times when the Supreme Court says, you know what, the states got it right. The states are the ones who are leading, and we will follow. And Batson and Duncan are those cases. The Supreme Court in both those cases relied on the content and consensus of state legislation and state law and copied and borrowed it. This state practice shaped and informed how the Supreme Court decided these major cases. And this is not the first time this has happened. Duncan and Batson are not outliers in that sense. We've seen this bottom-up dynamic in many other contexts. Take takings on the Fifth Amendment takings clause. The court has looked to state Supreme Courts to adopt their approaches to takings. Freedom of press, freedom of speech. Again, same dynamic where the Supreme Court has looked down to the states and said, you know what, these state court trial judges, these state court appellate courts, these state Supreme Courts, they got it right. Mapp versus Ohio, exclusionary rule, same dynamic. Supreme Court looking to state courts to follow the lead. Most recently in Moore versus Harper on the state independent doctrine, judicial review. Again, Justice Roberts looks to the states as well. And even in gun rights, the Heller decision on the Second Amendment, Justice Scalia looks to the state courts and state constitutions pre-Republic and says, you know what, that's a way that we can actually interpret the Constitution by looking to the states, right? So at the center of this tradition is the jury trials, as I mentioned, the cornerstone of our popular sovereignty. Our founders understood this, of course. The Pennsylvania Constitution, 1776, called for the right to a jury trial. They called it sacred. Long before American independence, a young Quaker named William Penn stood for trial in England for preaching outside the church. And there, the jury refused to convict him despite the pressure from the judge. The judge in England said, I'm going to punish you all for doing this. And of course, the jury's defiance led to a ruling. And as a result, that was overturned by the higher courts in England. Even Thomas Jefferson called the jury the only anchor by which a government can be held to the principles of its constitution. That's the power of a jury, not just a safeguard of liberty, but a direct expression of democracy. And this leads me to the work of PMC, which is ongoing with regards to jury trials and jury selection. But note here, and I think Debbie and I have had this conversation, I think part of the work that PMC is doing is to address this very problem, but the idea of jury trials is beginning to fray a bit in our society. Jury participation is declining. The data shows it. Disparities in jury selection continue to this day, even in light of Batson, even in light of Duncan. Too many citizens today see jury as a hassle and not a privilege. And it is indeed a privilege. That's why the work of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts is so essential. We look over the last year of what PMC has been doing, the Modern Juries and Modern Courts series, statewide speaker series that educates the public on the role and importance of jury service and democracy. It's incredibly important work. PMC in the community, as I mentioned, it starts in the community, not necessarily in the courtrooms. Court education programs that PMC has been doing over the last year, brought directly to the neighborhoods in Pennsylvania, in the neighborhoods, improving access to jury service, the advocacy work that PMC is doing to raise juror pay. This is unchanged since what, the 1950s? 1957. And supporting legislation for childcare, transportation, all those wonderful aspects of benefits. And expanding jury diversity, which is, again, still a problem. Pushing for broader statewide juror lists to ensure jury pools reflect the racial and economic diversity of Pennsylvania. This isn't just modernization, by the way, it's revitalization. It's not just modernization, it's revitalization. It's the fight to restore the jury as the voice of the people. Recall Batson and Duncan, where those cases started, right? In the communities, in the state trial courts. And so let me close with this. Batson and Duncan are more than just court cases. They are stories of ordinary people, of state courts stepping forward, of communities holding fast to conscience and justice. Those state courts may not have known at that time when they were making their rulings that they would someday become federal constitutional material for the Supreme Court. But I think state court judges should continue to think that way, that indeed their rulings not only shape the discourse of law in the state of Pennsylvania, for example, but may at some point shape the discourse and the law on a national level. Constitutional change doesn't always come from the marble halls of Washington, D.C. It doesn't. It comes from the ground up. So with that being said, let's honor the right to serve and to be judged by a jury of our peers. Let's empower our state courts as leaders in innovation and justice. And I see many of those state court judges here today. And keep doing the great work that you're doing. And let's not forget, the most powerful changes in American constitutional law often begin not from the top, but from the bottom up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. That was terrific. I've been taking notes as you speak, but I get to watch this. This will be on recording and you can show this as well. Next, I'd like to invite Mark Tambori, member of PMC's board, to introduce the Judge Justin Johnson award and awardee.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Congratulations, Sarah. It's a great outcome. Judge Lewis, thank you for your amazing introduction, and Dean Dickinson, that was incredible. Makes me want to go back to law school. So I see a lot of familiar faces. If you're a familiar face, we appreciate your really continued support for PMC. And to the new faces I see, thank you for getting on board with us. To those of you who've traveled from out of state, Texas, for this event, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I'm Mark Tambori. As Debbie said, I'm a member of the board. I'm the executive vice president and chief legal officer at UPMC. It's my great pleasure and honor to stand before you and present a man whose dedication, integrity, and commitment to justice and the rule of law have left an enduring impact on our legal community. As a former PMC board member, Jeff Wiley played a pivotal role in advancing our mission of promoting fair, accessible, and accountable courts through modernization, reform, and education. He brought thoughtful leadership, a strong sense of responsibility, and an unwavering belief in the power of judicial reform. His contributions were not limited to the PMC board meetings or finance committee meetings, but also included his passionate involvement in this community on matters that really go to the heart of what this organization's all about. The bedrock principles of our judicial system, including adherence to the rule of law and an independent judiciary. Jeff's a current shareholder and the former managing director and chief operating officer of Dickie, McCamey and Chilcote. He led the firm's expansion to 20 offices in 11 states, but he previously served as an ADA in Allegheny County in various trial units and as a legal advisor to 2 investigating grand juries. He's an avid supporter of his alma mater, Westminster College, giving back by serving on its board of trustees in 2 separate terms. And this is where I note that Debbie asked me to suggest that maybe Jeff would come back and serve a 2nd term at PMC. How'd I do? Good. It's therefore very fitting today that we honor Jeff with the Judge Justin Johnson Award. It's an award named after a jurist who embodied fairness, equality, and dedication to public service. Judge Johnson was appointed to the Pennsylvania Superior Court, making him the 2nd African-American judge appointed to that court. He was not only a remarkable jurist, but he was a role model and mentor to many. He was an adjunct professor at Duquesne Law and a founder of the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Minority Bar Committee. He sat on the board of trustees of Mercy Hospital, Southside Hospital, and the Princeton Theological Seminary, just to name a few. Judge Johnson set a powerful example in the legal world, and Jeff has followed in those footsteps with kindness, passion, and the utmost humility. On behalf of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, and with a deep appreciation for his service and impact, please join me in congratulating Jeff Wiley, the recipient of this year's Judge Justin Johnson Award. Thanks.
Very much, Mark. Thank you, Debbie. As I look out here, I see, I think, half of my firm. If I were still managing partner, I'd be thinking a lot of lost billable hours. But I don't have to worry about that anymore. This is quite an honor, and I appreciate it very much. Sarah, congratulations. Quite an honor and a good springboard into your career as a lawyer. Judge Lewis, thank you for your comments. We go back a long way, Judge Lewis and I do. In fact, I think we shared a desk in the general trial unit in the DA's office for a number of years. And Dean Dickinson, we have yet to meet, but I very much enjoyed your keynote. You may not know this, but you and I also have a connection. We share an alma mater, not law school, not college, but Shaler High School. I graduated 2, 3, or maybe 35 years or so before you, but at least we have that connection. Thank you again, Debbie, Michelle, and the PMC board for this honor. And I have trouble with my voice, so please forgive me ahead of time. Receiving an award in Judge Johnson's name is quite an honor, and for which I'm truly grateful. Debbie, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your dedication and your commitment to the values of PMC. I know it's not an easy job, and I know you're sailing against the wind quite a bit, but you have a great active and supportive board on which I was privileged to serve for a number of years. But you, Michelle, and your staff, you're really the engine that drives PMC. Without your commitment, PMC wouldn't be where it is now. Yours and your predecessor made us. Your enthusiasm and commitment to PMC's values are truly commendable. So thanks. Those values that are set forth in PMC's vision are really what bring us together today. Impartiality, fairness, and respect should be accorded to all participants in our judicial system. It's a seemingly simple principle. We all might think, well, of course that's true, and of course that's the case. But I've been in a lot of courtrooms over the past 47 years. And I've seen that sometimes those principles are applied unevenly, which makes PMC's mission all the more important to be a constant reminder of what our system should strive to be. As lawyers, we of course have a duty to act ethically and professionally. But by virtue of our roles, we must be adversarial within the system. Search for the truth is based on that adversarial system. I think the public understands that. But because this award is given in honor of Judge Justin Johnson, I'm going to briefly address the role of judges in our system. Dean, you so aptly discussed juries. I'm going to forget about the lawyers and I'm going to look at judges. And I know we have a number of judges in the room today, so I do this with some trepidation. I'm not scheduled to be in any courtrooms anytime soon, at least not voluntarily, so I think I should be okay. None of this is original, but it's meant to emphasize the role that judges like Judge Johnson has played in his career. We need to be reminded, I think, of the values expressed in PMC's vision statement, explicitly and implicitly. Judges hold a special place in our system, and they, along with lawyers, are charged with upholding those values. But the judge sets the tone. The judge is the face of the system. The judge is seen and watched by lawyers, litigants, spectators, and media. And in the trial court level, by jurors and witnesses. All of us look to the judge to be an umpire of sorts, to borrow from the vision statement, fair, impartial, and respectful. The judge must establish from the start, with words and deeds, a level playing field, and mix our metaphors to balance the scales of justice. And at the trial court level, those scales should only tip this way by preponderance of the evidence, or this way beyond a reasonable doubt. And at the appellate court level, they should only tip based on the law and the record as presented, and for no other reason. PMC's work serves as an essential reminder of that. Nothing less than the public trust is at stake. Without it, our judicial system is in trouble. It's my privilege to follow 3 judges who were prior recipients of this award: Judge Kim Berkeley Clark, Judge Doris Smith Ribner, and Judge D. Brooke Smith. 3 judges who I know, either from personal experience or by reputation, personified the values we're talking about today. So, of course, did another judge, the judge for whom this award is named. I never had the privilege of appearing before Judge Johnson, but I know his reputation from senior lawyers then at Dickie McCamey, lawyers like Dave Fawcett and Dave Armstrong, who did practice with and in front of Judge Johnson, I was present in this room and other rooms when this proceeding was held on behalf of Judges Clark, Smith, and Smith-Ribner, and they made comments about Justin Johnson. And of course, I have read much about Justin Johnson. Words that I've heard or read include fair, measured, dignified, mentoring, and just. I don't think it's an accident that those words align so well with PMC's vision. But two words really jumped out at me in reading comments and things said about him. Moral compass. How better to describe what we want, what we need in our judges? I don't know if any of you have ever have conducted that exercise that some of us have, especially now that I'm older, I do. What would we want inscribed on our headstone? I think I would take moral compass 10 times out of 10. It's to our judicial systems and our society's benefit that Judge Johnson's legacy lives on, in large part because of PMC's good works and the values that they emphasize. Thanks again very much.
Thank you, Jeff. And congratulations. Congratulations, Sarah. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Judge. And I think I'm forgetting somebody, but I'll think of it. Anyway, and thank you all for coming. We truly enjoy being here once a year. The weather cooperated this year. We also appreciate that. I know maybe some of you still don't have power, so I'm sorry about that. It's been a rough spring. But we didn't have a hurricane warning. I don't know if anybody remembers that, or tornado warning, but 3 years ago we had an event at the Allegheny Law Library and we had a tornado warning. So sunny. There's a beautiful roof upstairs too, I know. I don't know if it's still open, but thank you all and appreciate your being here. Have a good night.